Good morning, everyone. I'd like to take this initial opportunity to welcome everyone to the SCPGA Youth Teaching and Coaching Summit virtual segment series. My name is Josh Albert, founder of Good Swings Happen Junior Golf Academy. I am a PGA teaching professional member of the Southern California Teaching Committee and chair for this year's Youth and Teaching Summit, which originally was scheduled to be held March 23rd at the TGR Learning Lab in Anaheim. For obvious reasons, this year's program had to be canceled. A little business about the flow for today before we get cranking. I hope that everyone had an opportunity to watch the interview we posted with Collin Morikawa at Riviera Country Club during the Genesis Invitational. If not, it is posted on YouTube, and we will send each of you that link as part of a follow-up. If you do have questions for Collin or Rick based on that interview, or about anything that comes up in their discussion during the first part of today's program, please feel free to type in a question and we'll get to as many of them as we can at the end of the program. That being said, we're happy you're able to join us for the next hour to hear our keynote speaker and mental training guru, Rick Sessinghaus, as well as his longtime golf student, a young man who grew up playing golf here in Southern California on our local tours, a nationally acclaimed collegiate golfer at Cal, go Bears, and now current PGA Tour star and tour winner Collin Morikawa. Rick is a longtime member of the PGA and currently coaches at Shoal Canyon Golf Course in Glendale and at Performax Indoor Facility in Burbank. He holds a doctorate in applied sports psychology and authored the book, The Ultimate Mind Game. He's also the mental performance consultant for UCLA men's golf team. Rick has coached many elite juniors, collegiate, and professional golfers alike. I consider myself extremely fortunate to have worked with several clinics with Rick through the years, sharing mental game wisdom with our academy kids, as well as an annual program he leads for our local high school teams. Without further ado, I give you my good friend, Rick Sessinghaus.
Thank you so much, Josh. Thank you for the Southern California PGA for allowing me to share. And this is very exciting for me because this means a lot to me to be able to help junior golfers. And there's many different paths that we can go down. And today I'm just going to be sharing the way that I like to coach. There's so many great coaches that are online right now that are viewing this that I've learned from. And this is going to be fun to show you and learn also from Collin from an early age, now being on the PGA Tour. So thank you so much for being here today. It is about development is going to be the key thing for this next hour. And it's not all about victories, even though with Collin's resume, he's had several victories. But as we go along and talk about his development, we probably learn more from some of the defeats and some of the failures than from some of those successes. And as those that already maybe know Collin's background, but before I get into all of his accolades on the golf course, I just want to stress that as coaches, I think one of our roles is to help develop the person. And I was fortunate enough that Collin was already a great person and a great young man who has great character and great values that all of us I know would want to see in the youth that we develop. But I think it's our role too to cultivate that as we go along. So when we look at Collin's wonderful career, and this is just a snippet of it, is, I did not put down all the junior stuff from Southern California PGA and HAGA and certain things like that. But I do want to show that at every level he has had success, and there has been both a individual, but also some team environment stuff. I think a lot, especially with the PGA Junior League, we're starting to stress team and abilities to get these juniors competing in a fun environment. Well, Collin's played in some high-level team events that maybe he'll talk about later of what he learned from the Palmer Cup and the Walker Cup. As I go along, I look at it, and again, it's going kind of down memory lane for us. But it's interesting that, again, this is development from a junior level to a college level to an amateur level to a professional level. And what I look at, Collin, and you can certainly look at these great accolades, is at what point did you feel that you had kind of, I don't know, made it is maybe the wrong word, but that you really felt you are now on the other end of it of becoming more of an elite player?
Yeah, well, we'll start off with thanks for everyone for listening, just like you said. But I think going back, you have it right there, the Western Junior. That's when things change. Obviously, wins, solidify everything. They're the results you want to see, and that's what is going to give you the most confidence. But after winning that and actually competing on one of the biggest stages, because at that point I had already played some AJGAs, I had played big Toyota Tour Cups with guys, that I grew up watching that, were going to be seniors when I was a freshman in college, things like that. But winning the Western Junior is something that I think kind of transitioned me from being, okay, I can compete with these guys, I can beat them week in, week out, to actually trying to win every single week.
Great. And we will talk about this winning mentality again throughout today, because I think there's an interesting dynamic with golf is we, as a mental game coach, as a swing coach, of course, I believe the process is very important, but I do not downplay outcome. And I think it is important to understand that if we have a goal to win, okay, that we then have to understand what are those processes that we need to get there. And unfortunately with golf, our winning percentages are not as high as maybe some other sports in team events. Can you tell me a little bit about the Walker Cup experience for you? Because again, I think as these juniors who may be listening today and some of the coaches is we have an individual sport and then they're trying to get into college, which now becomes a team environment. But I felt that the Walker Cup was interesting because now we're playing for our country. Can you give me a little snippet of what you kind of learned from that experience?
Yeah, I think team events are some of the best events you can play in, whether it's, a local team at your country club or, with a bunch of friends. Like, team events is what brings out the best in people, because, then you go from playing for yourself to playing with everyone, on the team, and you want to represent yourself and your team as best as you can. So when you think about the Walker Cup and you think about the first really big US, representation for myself, it was huge. I mean, it was probably the most nervous I've been to this day. One of the most nerve-wracking things I've done is teeing off. I was the first tee shot for the US. We were the first match out, and having that tee shot to hit it, at LACC was, unbelievable. But when you think about team events and you represent your country like that, you have to remember and you have to step back and realize what you're doing, but you have to remember that the golf is not different from, when I was just practicing when I was a 10-year-old to playing on the Walker Cup. Like, it's still golf. The whole locations are still on the green. It's not like anything has changed. It's just the stage being there and having, the American flag being on your shirt everywhere, that, every piece of clothing you're wearing. And it just made it a lot more special to go out there and just have fun. I mean, you had to.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so we may go back to some of these accomplishments, but I want to start to share a little bit more about my own coaching philosophy, but specifically for Collin's development, what I felt he excelled at. And you will notice there is going to be nothing about his golf swing, as good as it is. I believe what separates good from great has a lot to do with mindset skills. And Collin, from an early age, already had some of these, and I felt my job with Collin was to cultivate these. And when I look at, and I was talking to somebody the other day about that, where I knew when Collin was going to be a player that whatever he wanted when he was about 12 years old. Now, again, he already had some really good fundamentals when I met him when he was 8 years old. He had some great group coaching. He had great hand-eye coordination. There's talents, and a lot of us coaches online here, we have a lot of really talented players. Talent doesn't always then equate to success down the road, and I believe some of these traits that Collin possesses and that as a coach I'm trying to cultivate do make a big difference. And one, back then, we didn't really have the word growth mindset, but I believe Collin always has been able to learn and be open to learning and to be curious about learning, and just being able to frame that instead of, oh, I'm doing something wrong, which makes me, oh, I'm not very good, and oh, I can't get this. Never heard any of that. And so if you did not believe you had a skill, or if I believed you did not have that skill at the moment, you were open to learning it in many different ways. And maybe not the first time did it work, but maybe going down some different roads, we finally got you to develop some different skills. The other thing which I do want to ask you a little bit about is, I don't remember if I ever heard you make an excuse for any of your performances. And I hear this a lot. Hey, I've done it. Is when you have a round that may not go your way or not get the outcome you wanted. I never heard you make an excuse about conditions or pace of play or who you're playing with or bad breaks. Can you tell me a little bit about you being able to take ownership for and responsibility for your game?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to take ownership. You have to realize what's going on out there, because if you don't, you are going to blame other things, and everything's out of your control at that point. To be honest, I'm pretty sure I've blamed myself and I've played the victim during lessons or when I'm practicing, because my dad, just say when I was younger, my dad, we might be practicing out there and he might tell me one thing, but I'm doing it and I just can't feel it. That's where you guys come in. That's where coaches come in, because you guys are able to offer a different opinion, a different, an eyesight to help us realize what we're trying to do. So when you're on the course, you're out there just trying to make birdies. You're trying to make the best score you can on every single hole and get out. So there's nothing to blame. You can't, I think when you sit in the past, it makes it a lot harder to go on to that next hole. And I think I've done a really good job of going from, if I have a bad hole, to kind of moving on, going on to the next and forgetting the past. Because when you sit back and you just, you dwell on what has happened, you're not going to be able to move forward. And golf, even though it could be 5 hours long, it goes by quick. 18 holes goes by very quickly.
Right. And it doesn't mean, I've never said that you had to be happy after a 3-putt or anything like that, and that you have to be having fun when you're not playing how you want to. Yet what I really want to emphasize here is that you never made excuses. So it wasn't that, hey, Rick, I had a poor putting day because the greens were bumpy and, oh my God, you should have seen the sand on the green. It was never any of that. You took ownership that, hey, I didn't get the job done today, and now let's learn from it. And I think that leads to also that you were very open to feedback. Even though I have some students who say they want to get better and they're at a golf lesson, that you would hope that they're open to some feedback. They sometimes look at it as criticism and as a way of, uh-oh, he's telling me I'm bad or something like that. And you were always open to feedback, and which again leads to the other one, which is, I think you have a very curious nature about yourself and that you love to learn. Would you say that that is a value that you have with golf?
Yeah, and I think that's just like a huge personality thing. It's a trait that I've always had, not just about golf, but anything I do, really, anything I set my sights on, is to learn as much as I can. And it's not necessarily, it's not like I'm the most open person during lessons. Like I'm trying to listen, but I want to take in as much as I can and learn from you, and then try and filter out things, try and process it in a way that I'm going to understand. I think everyone learns the best. Everyone learns differently, but they learn the best from when they, teach them themselves, when they're able to figure it out, on their own. And you could have a bunch of coaches tell you one thing many different ways, but it's about learning how you learn the best, right? So we have figured out certain cues, certain words that help, make us visualize the shot a little better, make us visualize a certain trajectory we want. And, it's taken a long time and we're still trying to figure out things that work. But for me, learning is just a huge part. It's not about, knowing every little part to understand everything, but it's about knowing as much as I need to know and going from there.
That's great. And I think part of when I look at my own philosophy is, it can get, as a coach, we can get super technical, and there's so much great technology and so many experts out there that we can get down the rabbit hole and forget what we're trying to do, which is to play a game with a pretty basic outcome. I want to get the little white ball to the hole as few strokes as possible. And so when we look at our journey, when I met you at the age of 8 and all the way until you graduated high school, we saw each other consistently. And yet it wasn't all about the range. It wasn't always about perfect golf swing and get the club on this perfect plane. It certainly was about what I call pattern recognition. I wanted to recognize what your patterns were as a player. And yet I wanted to also see what those patterns were on the golf course. So over half of our lessons were done on the golf course. I was very fortunate, the two facilities that we worked at, Shoal Canyon Golf Course in Glendale and Chevy Chase Country Club, allowed that. Allowed us to hop in a cart with your dad and being able to hit a few different shots. So I'm very fortunate that I've had facilities to support that. And yet I always, because I played other sports before I played golf, and it was about playing the sport and a lot less about coaching. You know, you played football and you played football and the coach was there. In golf, I felt there was something missing, and that's why I stress so much of on course. So over half of our lessons were done on the golf course. And for me, that's about the variability of the game. Golf is one of the few sports that does not have the same exact field that other basketball court or all the other dimensions are the same. And I think that variability needs to be experienced and practiced. And so we would do different lies and different shots and different situations, because I wanted to, again, see what your patterns were in as many situations as possible. And I think one of the key things, and this is back to your learning, is I would put you in a situation where we may put 2 or 3 golf balls down, and I would, of course, allow you to make the first decision. I had to be careful, and I learned this early in my coaching career, of not to overcoach and tell somebody what they should do before they even allow themselves to experience it. So that first shot was Collin's decision. Okay, I'm going to hit this with a wide open 60 degree, and I'm going to do this. Great. And we see the result. Then I would ask him, okay, now that you've hit it once, what could you do differently if you do need to do anything differently? And then that third ball would be me chiming in saying, you know what, Collin, this is how I view the shot. This is how I think about it. And it doesn't mean mine was right or wrong. It just gives him another way of having a perspective to it. You know, I kind of joke with a lot of the junior golfers and college players that I'm trying to put all my experience of my head into their head so they have a different perspective on how to see shots. Doesn't mean that that's the shot they have to play. The other thing that I stress is a lot about competition. I believe it's important to see how somebody reacts when there's something on the line. And we always finished our lessons with competition. We had a lot of fun with that. And I know the joke with Collin said to us about a month ago is that he notices we're not doing as many competitions in our sessions as much as possible. Well, I have an ego. I'm a coach. I wanted to make sure it was in my favor. No, joking. But he was always open to that. And on that, and I'll talk about it a little bit later. But with competition, here's the distinct difference I've seen between you and some of my really, really good players and some solid juniors, but never quite get there, is how they take on competition. So even at the age of 8, 9, 10, 11, I would compete against you. You never, ever, ever said, oh, this is unfair. You're a professional. There's no way I can win. You took it on. You wanted to beat me. And I loved that attitude about it. Okay. Other people will already complain even before the competition begins. So I think that's something you did have inherent in you already, is a competitive chip in you that wanted to win, but wanted to take on challenges, which I think is something that we all as coaches want to help our students do, is take on challenges. You may not always succeed, but guess what? We can always learn from that. We've talked a ton about the growth mindset already, which is learn, 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 learn. If I don't have a skill, I can always do something about it, which you've done great with. And one of my roles, and we talk about development, was once I knew that Collin wanted to play high-level Division I golf, I always professed that I want him to own his golf swing when he went to college. And what I meant by that is that we wouldn't have as much interaction, and he would have to do it on his own. And you did mention something earlier, Collin, which I really admire, is sometimes you need to figure something out. I don't always have to jump in with an answer. I think that is, there's a maturity about that I think helped you in college tremendously, is we did not get to see each other as often, but I did want you to have the tools to be able to understand your shot patterns and what are your common tendencies first. So then you go, oh yeah, I did that again. And then, yeah, of course, if you didn't figure that out, of course, you would send me a video, or we would talk on the phone, and 2 minutes later, we would have a solution for it. So that's something that I do think is important, is that as coaches, we don't always have to fix things immediately. Having a little struggle for the player is a good thing. They can now figure it out for themselves, is, as Collin put it before, actually more powerful than a coach just telling somebody what to do. And I think we had talking about process, we had a coach-player process after tournaments that we were always having a feedback loop back and forth of, obviously beforehand, how are you going to prepare for this event? What's the mindset going to be? What's your strategy? But then on the flip end, did you actually achieve those things? Collin, is there anything on that list or something that pops out at you that you felt was beneficial for you?
I mean, you touch back on the competition, but I think going back, looking from how our lessons have gone from, age 8 to now, especially our transition from junior golf, where I was able to see you a lot, to college, is we brought, what we could do on the course, and you would see patterns. We'd hit a few shots at a certain, distance, to when it was in college, where it was not really about how I was practicing or what I was doing. But like you said, it was talking about, after each tournament, what were my tendencies? What are my tendencies now? Can we tighten them a little bit, but can we play with what we're doing? If I could play with my cut shot or whatever I was bringing that tournament, we were going to be perfectly fine. So what were we going to focus on then? So it was, there were very similar points in the lessons, from whether there was age 10 to when I was 20 in college. But it was just a different, a way of doing it. It wasn't on course, it was through the phone. And I had to articulate, what I saw, what I felt to you through the phone. And, it was a big part on me to be able to, open up and realize what was going on with my game. Because if I didn't, I think on that side, we wouldn't have been able, if I told you every single time, yeah, my ball's perfectly straight, I'm making every putt, what is there to talk about? It's not like you knew every golf course. It's not like every coach out there knows every golf course we're going to play. So it's about what am I feeling in my body? And you understood that really well, which was very nice for me.
Great, thanks.
Rick, if I can jump in here, and I may not, maybe I'll be stating the obvious here. The rest of the golfing world, juniors we work with, in large numbers, and no offense to anybody who's listening in here, do not necessarily have the same healthy mindset that Collin had innately as a golfer. Certainly, you've helped to nurture him. Rick, can you speak a little bit maybe about the juniors that are negative, might be a club slammer, not confident, all those things that we quite frankly do see in the majority of the younger players that we work with. Can you share a little bit about things that you would do to help shape those folks, us folks, it's not just juniors, toward a better mindset?
Sure. I unfortunately was one of those club throwers, emotional tantrums when I played college golf and high school golf. And so every player is different, but I think there's two distinct things you said in that. One is emotion, the other one is confidence. And as coaches, we certainly want to cultivate confidence, but without giving somebody a false sense of confidence. And I'm seeing, and somebody get to this in another slide, is it's okay to challenge our students. We don't always have to tell them how great they are. They win a US Kids tournament, oh, that's fantastic. But if we blow it out of proportion, that junior golfer is only going to associate golf with, oh, I get a bunch of recognition when I win. And then if I don't win, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me. So as coaches, we have to be very careful in how we celebrate, but also how we give feedback. And, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but Collin and I rarely talked about, hey, I saw you shot this score. Why'd you shoot that? It was not about that. And so I think we have to help the student, this is about development, remember, understand there's many of these levels and steps along the way, and getting back to, did we do today's step better? Did I actually practice what I told my coach I was going to practice? And can I give him feedback, or her? That gives some ownership of today's type of thing. I think a lot of juniors get, and a lot of golfers, but get way ahead of it. They're a 13-year-old, they want to play at a D1 school, and they go, oh, see, I'm not good enough. I go, you're 13 years old. We're not even close to that age yet. And they're so far in the future that as coaches, we have to bring them back as to what is something that in the moment that they could learn from, and that, yeah, we want to create success. But I think we also have to be careful of our feedback loops of not blowing out of proportion some success in a tournament. And how I would follow that up with saying, hey, you won, I'm proud of you, I think that's great. Tell me what you think led to you winning. And rarely, honestly, rarely do I hear, oh, my swing plane was perfect and my wrist angle and my lag and load release was no. I usually hear about, hey, Rick, you know what? I really stayed focused this day. I really stayed composed. I did that post-shot routine we talked about to be able to deal with the bad shots. Now, I do want to emphasize that they won, but I want them to know why they won and get a little bit further away from, oh, it's because I had perfect mechanics. It was, you know what? I did a good job of staying in my process. So I do allow the outcome to be a form for questions, but I also try to get people coming back that get too far in the future to get them more in the present. Josh, does that answer that?
Yes, it does. Absolutely. It very much does. And I just, I just think that, as we work with juniors, and just, as a profession, we do seem to spend so much time focused on grip, stance, posture, hitting off of driving range mats. If someone says, what's the definition of a golf lesson, of what it seems like we see, we think of a golf lesson as those things. And the reality is that the game is played on the golf course, and the game is about going through the experience of not feeling comfortable with your swing and not knowing what to do in different situations. And I feel in general, obviously Collin had innate abilities to do these things, and that certainly is part of the equation. But your ability to lead him and challenge him to think about those experiences, as an overarching, I think that our industry needs to do a better job of preparing people to have more fun and play better golf on the golf course, because that's really what the whole practice element is. It's about preparing to play, not preparing to, like you said, hold a wrist angle at a certain thing. So, it's great stuff.
If you don't mind me adding on to that, I think I've been touching on this point. It's a huge point. I think I've taken really to heart since I've turned pro. But you look, and this is very much to juniors as well, as expectations versus goals. I know Rick has heard this, but Rick and I have set a bunch of goals for ourselves. We've been, when I was a junior to now, we're always setting goals. And I think expectations are what people put on us. They're what coaches might put on you, parents, family, friends, whatever it is. Expectations are going to be there. You can't not have expectations, but it's not from inside yourself, and it's what you really believe in. Those are the goals. And I think people get mad. I still see it today. Pros get mad, juniors get mad, college guys get mad, whoever it is, your local guy, your country club. People get mad because they expect to see something happen. They expect these results to happen because, yeah, I put in all these hours on the range, I put in all these hours on the putting green, I expect this to happen. But no, you have to think of it as a goal. And I think that's what Rick has always done a good job for me, is what is our goal for the week? Yes, our goal is to win. If we don't win, we're going to come back next week and try and win. That's our goal. But we have other parts of that goal, is to, what is it? To, make sure I go through my pre-shot routine 1 second slower, to take a deep breath, extra goals to help, filter through that path and through that process of reaching that ultimate goal. If I just expect to win, I'm going to be very mad, because people are going to expect that. I'm going to expect that now. And what am I going to do from there? I'm going to be mad. We're going to be throwing clubs. We're going to be doing all this. But those are the people that I don't think are setting the goals from themselves. They just expect something's going to happen. And if it doesn't, that's when they're really going to take a step back and realize they're going to be behind everyone else, because they're not taking that next step of learning and getting better. So, people are going to get angry. It happens. You know, you can be setting goals and get mad at yourself when you're on the range. I still do that, you know, if I'm not reaching to that goal. But if I start realizing what other people expect from me, then, you know, I'm not going to be learning at all. I just had to add that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point.
If I just add in there too, you know, on those lines, you know, I've always thought, and again, I didn't grow up with a golf club in my hand at 4 or 5. I was playing Nerf basketball in my room and baseball and stickball, and you know, we were just outdoors playing games. And I you know, maybe it was just because we didn't have someone pointing at us talking about winning and losing. I always thought that losing was the biggest gift. And this isn't just specific to golf, obviously, but if I lost something and I didn't play well, it allowed me an opportunity more clearly than when I was playing well to identify what those problems were. And I just see a lot of juniors that associate losing as being a bad thing and a failure, and they're discouraged and they don't want to show their faces. And of course, parents get mad, and you know, some coaches don't do as well. If we could think of losing as the biggest gift of all, because it's going to glaringly show us exactly what is going on, and then we take that gift, write it down, identify, acknowledge it, and own it. It gives us a map of exactly what it is we need to be working on to get better. And if the goal is to get better, then losing is a healthy component of becoming a champion. Obviously, Collin, you know, you've seen and probably experienced late in tournaments where things didn't go your way or did go your way. And, you know, we hear it every day on tour, you know, when the questions come, you know, those failures lead players to becoming better. Do you feel that way in your experience for you and what you see on tour with the other players that are out there?
Absolutely. I mean, it's just part of golf. You know, you're gonna not win a lot of the time. I mean, if you have a good winning percentage, that means you're doing something really, really good. You know, I'm thinking back to when, you know, times where, you know, I'll look back at my junior days in high school golf, right? High school golf is very different than playing in SCPGA, Tour Cups, AJGAs, whatever it is. It's very different. You know, high school golf is there for us to have fun, to be with the team. But you look at who's working the hardest are the guys, probably your 3, 4, your 2, 3, 4, 5 guys. Same thing in college. Who's normally the guys that are working absolutely, you know, they're grinding, are the 2, 3, 4 guys because they want to get to the top. The guys that are number one are the guys that might slack off. And that's when you have to realize, if you are your number one guy, if you are the best on your team, how can you set new goals and motivate yourself to get better? You know, the guys at the number one in the world and the PGA Tour are not slacking because they know guys are right behind them, and they know, you know, there's many other things they want to accomplish. And that's the thing for us, or for me, it never stopped of just being, you know, I'm going to win this tournament. I'm okay. Now we're done, and we're going to be perfectly fine for the rest of the year. If I win one tournament, we're trying to win the next. We're trying to get better the next day and not take a break from anything. Yes, you know, I've been great about taking breaks, especially through college, where, you know, every winter I'd take 1 week off, not touch a club, get away from the game, you know, relax. You have to. You know, a year is a long time. And, you know, during this time now, you know, you got to take a break. But for me, it was, you know, how can we just get better? No matter what position we were on the team, no matter where we were in tournaments, how can we get better that next day? And I think that was a really big point that I still take on to you know, tournaments today.
That's great. We're going to talk more about expectations as we go along. As we look at this idea of long-term development, so Collin and a few of my students and juniors throughout the years have been open to looking at long-term goals, with obviously the path coming down to what do I need to do today. So I mentioned before, it's easy for some of our juniors when I meet them for the first time and I ask them what their goals are. And it's a 13-year-old who says, I want to get a full scholarship to Cal Berkeley. And that sounds like a very motivating goal, which is fantastic. But I ask them how they're going to get there, and they really don't have a plan. And then they always will talk about, well, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. And I say, well, that's 5 years from now. We need to know what those stepping stones are as we go along. So what I appreciated with Collin and his parents was that they had trust in me, that there was a plan not only for the next season, but where this led to. And as we got to closer to college, you know, helping consulting, saying, hey, these are the type of tournaments we need to play in. This is how the recruiting process is going to be. This is how our game needs to improve to play across the country. I'm, as a coach, trying to think ahead. And if I don't have the answers, I would ask some great colleagues of ours who have gone through it for their answers. But I think back to long-term development is back to this learning process. Is if our goal, or Collin's goal, was to win a college tournament, which he did, I always backtrack the question and say, okay, in order to win this week, what type of player do you need to be? Now, I leave that very open-ended. It could be, well, Rick, we're playing this golf course that requires a lot of accuracy off the tee. I'm going to be hitting 3-woods and utility irons off the tee more. I'm going to be trusting my little cut. And then also, I need to be a type of player who's going to be patient, because with the difficulty of this golf course, I need to be patient for birdies. And what we've done is we've taken the outcome goal and we've brought it down to a process. Okay, so I don't want people to think this is just process. I want people to have goals. I want people to get motivated to want to achieve things. However, if you don't have the follow-up answer of how are you going to do it, how are you going to show up to give yourself the best opportunity, then unfortunately you're going to have some struggles. So we have a balance that I have with Collin and other players is certainly in the moment, this tournament is the most important thing. As a coach, I'm thinking ahead, okay, Collin wants to be a PGA Tour winner. Okay, what things need to change? Now, I don't know all the answers, okay, but I'm trying to help think ahead. Collin, can you talk a little bit about when you, of course, graduated, which was awesome, the business school at Cal, you stayed 4 years. You get the question a lot about, hey, you could have turned pro earlier. But the question I have for you is the last year of college, as well as you wanted to play in those events, what was something that you did to prepare for the future?
Oh, it was everything. It was, I was fortunate enough to get a couple starts on the PGA Tour already as an amateur and kind of learn the ropes. But for me, it was figure out what was I going to do, for warm up. The PGA Tour, when you're on those tournaments, everything is at your fingertips. You could get anything, any information available. You can get any device, any equipment, whatever you want. And we can all be drawn to that. I think we all are, people that love the game. They want to have the new things. They want to have fun with, whatever is new and exciting. But for me, it was to figure out how I was going to warm up, what I was going to do stretching wise, what I was going to do, with the team. Sometimes with all 5 guys, we might have to show up. If you're the last tee time off, you might have to show up 2.5 hours early, 2 hours early, because guys might want to be there. But for me, I had to know, yeah, everyone's out there. I want to go be out there with my team. I want to be out there, getting ready. But that's not my routine. That's not who I was. That's not the player I am. So that senior year, I really used the time wisely to, figure out how I was going to eat, what I was going to do to stretch, how I was going to break down my time to really be prepared as much as I can, but not be, drained out before that first round started or before that final round started. I used that entire senior year just to figure out, how I was going to plan things. I think I did a great job. If I translate that from high school to college, from senior year of high school to freshman year of college, how I was going to plan out going around classes, how I was going to, have my classes in the morning, whatever, like we had to figure out how I was going to practice. And it's all evolved from how I was going to practice, in college by myself with the team to how I was going to practice on the range, how I was going to practice by myself as a tour pro now.
Right. And I think the other thing that you utilized in that year was finding the equipment, finding, there was things that we knew you were going to have to make a decision when you turn pro. And I'm trying to minimize variables when you want to play at your best. And if you turn pro and you start tinkering and you change clubs and club manufacturers, to me, that's a variable that should have been dealt with beforehand. I thought you did a good job of, making some of those experimenting happen in that last year. I want to talk a little bit about, when you and I talk about a tournament, I ask kind of the same 3 questions is kind of what did you do well, right? I always want to frame it of a player, especially at your caliber, is going to be very hard on themselves. And sometimes they're going to evaluate just based on negatives. And I get that. Yet I always want to frame it, it's like, hey, let's remind ourselves we did some of these things well. The next one, which is I think the question that I want everybody to take away from today, is what did you learn? And and I hope I'm getting this right, but I think you were 16 years old, and I remember you coming to me for a lesson, and I knew you just played an AJGA event in Oklahoma. I believe it was Karsten Creek, and it wasn't one of your better tournaments. Okay, and I want you to kind of explain to the coaches and the juniors that are on of what your process was when you came back, when we asked about what you learned from that experience.
Yeah, there's two tournaments that really stick out to me about, really learning something. And it was there, Carson Creek, Ping Invitational, and the Polo at PGA National. They still have the Honda Classic there. And what I realized was I did not have a golf game to play in the wind at all. It was just hands down. I didn't know what to do. I was clubbing up 2-3 clubs, trying to hit it as just a normal shot, trying to play with that. And I remember, especially after PGA National, I missed the cut, missed the match play or whatever. I spent a couple days there because our flight didn't leave. And I tried to experiment on how to hit in the wind. It's hard being in California, obviously, with the weather conditions. We have the best weather. It's hands down, we get the best weather. There's no wind, it's sunny days. We're inside when it rains, but when it is windy, like it is everywhere else in the country, and it seems like that it's windy every tournament we play now, I had to learn something. I had to figure out how I was going to play in the wind, what I was going to do. And it wasn't just hitting in the wind, it was how I was going to putt in the wind. How was I going to feel comfortable? And I'm still, tinkering with things here and there, week by week, debating, depending where we are. But, you look back, you were in Hawaii this year when we were playing at Kapalua. It was, it was very, very windy. And then, I go the next week to Sony and it's blowing 35, 40 mile per hour. So, those two junior tournaments, it really opened my eyes to what's out there. And it's hard for everyone to obviously travel to different places and play golf. But when you do get an experience like that, you have to really figure out, what am I going to do differently?
And what I appreciate that, though, is you came to me saying, Rick, I am not prepared to play in those conditions. Instead of some juniors saying, Rick, I played bad because of the wind. And they leave it at that. You said, this is a skill set I don't have yet. Here's the key word, everybody. Yet is a growth mindset term. I don't have it yet, so you learned it. You didn't call me after PGA National. We met afterwards, but you took the time to say, hey, I'm going to figure this out. And so I think that's a huge learning thing for everybody, is that it doesn't always go well, but you processed it, you said, I got to do something about it, and went from there. So those are the things that jump out to me as we went along your development, is you took a lot of ownership for that and didn't make excuses of why that happened. And then, of course, the follow-up for us would then be, hey, what do we need to improve and how? Oh, I need to improve my iron play into the wind. Am I going to flight it? Am I going to change ball position? Am I going to change, and now you and I get to experiment, but you were already open to the experimentation of that. The other thing we've talked about a little bit is embracing getting outside your comfort zones. You talked a little bit about the Walker Cup and being nervous, yet if I remember correctly, that first match went quite well, didn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it was nice to have someone that hit it, 330 down the middle, and we were making a lot of putts, putting our opponents down to the ground. But yeah, no, it went fine. It went fine.
Yeah. So for all you out there, nervousness doesn't mean it's bad. Nervousness can be excitement. Nervousness can be used for improving focus. It can get you excited to the point where you go, this is important, which means I'm going to do my processes more. So comfort zones can help us feel, again, uncomfortable, great, and then being able to do something with that. And the last thing I want to put on this with development, which, in this particular situation, I was very, very fortunate that Collin's parents, they trusted me. Collin's father, Blaine, was at every single golf lesson pretty much from the age of 8 to 18, and they were a great support system. Now, many of you may be thinking, oh, was he really involved? Was he on you all the time? And the answer would be no, but he asked specific questions throughout the lesson to make sure he understood, because he knew that he would be with Collin when Collin was practicing, so they would be clarifying what they were going to be working on. And I know I've had the bad parent situation with certain juniors, and I know it can go sideways. In this particular situation, the parents trusted me. They looked at the long-term development. They saw how Collin and I acted and reacted to each other, and part of that was certainly having fun, but we did have a really strong relationship on that.
Rick, when you are in a situation with junior lessons specifically, and you do have a parent that is not productive, do you have a rule about? I mean, obviously in Collin's situation, the parents were very involved, and it was completely appropriate, and it helped the process. Do you have a rule about how you engage with kids and parents when you first start working with them to explain to the parent sort of the rules of the road? Do you let it sort of go to, naturally kind of evolve, or how do you handle a parent who is not productive?
I kind of let it go organically, to be honest with you. I do make it a point that I want a parent, doesn't have to be both parents, there at the very first lesson in interaction, because I want them to see how I behave in front of their child, to know that I'm a type of coach that is supportive and energetic. And so they get a reality check on that. Nowadays with technology, whether it's video or email, I would CC a parent to say, hey, this is what Johnny and I worked on today, and this is what our game plan is. So I want to, at the start, I want to have that relationship with the parent also. And I do say, hey, if you have questions, please, you can call me, you can email me, great. But then what happens is I start, and this is that expectation word popping out again, is we see pretty early on of what is the junior's expectation compared to what the parent's expectation is. And then when I've had those conversations, say, oh, okay, so you think Johnny should be the #1 player in Southern California in 2 years. Oh, okay, well, that's interesting. In order to do that, I would then say this is what would have to happen. And so then we can kind of get on the same page, but then even there, I said, that's maybe not a realistic timeline for us right now. Let's look at that. So I want to open up, because I know expectations is the #1 sticking point. I want those out early in the relationship. Or, hey, why are you seeking me out for instruction? Oh, because we want to get a college scholarship. I said, oh, we do, or you do? And so those are some of the conversations that I have early on.
Yeah, I would say in that, working with a lot of juniors in individual, group, and team formats, I don't have a specific rule about whether a parent is allowed or not allowed to be involved in it. But the more I coach and teach, I definitely am more apt as a coach to be upfront about what it is that we're doing with the juniors to that point, whether the parent has given me an indication or not. I want to share with that parent first lesson or early on in the relationship that what we are cultivating, especially with the younger player, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, it might even push into high school sometimes, that our objectives are certainly to get better at hitting a golf ball and making the ball go in the hole and those things. Obviously, you have hired me to help your son or daughter get better at the game of golf. But our true objectives, and it sort of goes along the lines with what you're talking about, is that if the kids are having fun playing, if there's challenges and games and competitions that are appropriate for whoever the player that you're in front of are. And it's not about winning and losing, it's about playing, it's about experiencing. And we set the backdrop to the parent immediately. This is not about me trying to help your son achieve those things, but just cultivate a love of playing the game of golf and wanting to come back. If we can do that as an initial objective, then all of those other things are going to happen. A kid who loves playing golf and enjoys being there is the one who's then going to get better and practice more and be the driver of the cart. The kid who's being dragged around and told he has to do something, it's never worked that way. What has anyone ever done really, really well that they were dragged by the ear to do? And so I think as an industry, we need to be mindful, especially with younger players, that our goals really should be less about making that player great and more about how can I interact with this kid and his family and develop a love of playing the game, because if you do those things, then everything else happens. I
agree. And so when we have that interaction, that's why I want the parent to see, because I'm not a fit for everybody. I'm not. And some parents can see that, because maybe I'm not as, even though I used to be a very technical swing coach back in the day, maybe I'm not technical enough for that parent, and maybe they voice that, and I'm fine with that, and I'll have that discussion. But I think it is important to understand the expectations. And as we talk about long-term development, you hit it right in the head. If they're not enjoying it at the age of 12 or 13, I know they're not going to enjoy it at 18, 19 when they're playing D1 and a head coach is on them for showing up late for workout at 6 a.m. So they have to keep that love of the game. It doesn't mean every day we're happy, but it does mean that they enjoy the intrinsic reasons of this game. So I completely agree with you. And the parent has a huge influence on that. Yeah. And I think along with that, with the support system, is when I look at creating a team, and I know Josh, you and I have talked about team environments, we are so lucky, and I'm just going to talk about Southern California, but obviously nationally, we have so many wonderful PGA coaches at our disposal. And let's just talk about the positive stuff on social media, is we can collaborate with people quite easily. And I learned this, a while ago, is I don't have all the answers. And for those players that are as motivated as Collin, I have a duty to not only up-level my own skill set, but if I don't have the answer, to be able to get that. And so it's been, I get to learn along the way too. And so with his development, we started with some physical assessments around the age around 16, some basic core exercises. At that age, he was actually hitting some draws, for those that know his game, where he hits a fade now. Some of that was body driven, a little bit weaker core, a little bit weaker left hip. He would slide, drop the club under plane. So we want to address the physical part of that. A good friend and colleague, Don Parsons, one of the best at K-Vest and 3D, taking him up there in his college years to say, hey, Don, I can't see everything, and you're an expert at this. Is there anything I could change differently? And I think he made some ideas about posture with him and stuff like that. So I really thank Don for his input. And then up at Don's place too, Preston Combs, a great putting instructor, got to put Collin on the Sam Lab and helped him with a few things that about aim point. Not that Collin uses aim point, but again, it's about learning. And Collin said before, he's going to filter out what works for him and what doesn't. But I needed to give him access to some of these experts. Currently, right now, we had an advanced kind of physical assessment with Leo Rooney from UGP, and that's really helped him with the pre-round stretching, with some maintenance, with all the travel he has to do. I'm certified in something called athlete assessment, which personality profiles. I want to understand people's personalities under stress. And so I'm trying to create a team environment. And when somebody is 10, 11, I can probably answer most of these questions. But to the level Collin wanted to get to, I knew I was doing a disservice to tell him that I knew all those answers. And so, and this is going even in the future, right? I mean, we're lucky with TaylorMade. He got great clubs, he's getting club fit. I mean, all these pieces come together. But I think what I'm seeing on the good news with collaborations with the Southern California PGA, we've got so many wonderful coaches who can help each other out in their expertises, because it is all about the player. It's not about the coach. And so if we can serve the player better, I think we're going to help people enjoy the game more and play more often. Is there any feedback you can give me, Collin, on kind of the team kind of approach?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone needs to build a team around them. And, are you talking about like who I've built my team around? Or you're not talking about that playing? Well,
but even right now, like you added a team member, well, yeah, actually two, which I would consider JJ, the caddy, which has been huge. Mm-hmm. And then you're a professional now, and you have you're represented by an agency. I mean, that is a team thing too. So there's a lot of elements that go beyond performance. But actually, tell me a little bit about your relationship with JJ as a caddy, as being a key part of your team.
It's huge. I mean, it's like it's almost like he's another coach. He's not coaching me, but the way he talks through it, and I never would have thought, I would need a caddy like that, because I thought, I'd have it all in my head, but really I don't. He's able to offer that extra opinion, or offer the 5 extra opinions of how to hit a shot. And he might not even believe in all of them. I might not never believe in all of them, but it allows me to think, around the straight way I would normally think and hit that one shot. So to have a relationship like that is awesome. To add him to my team, I'm so lucky to have him. And adding an agent, right? Made my life way easier. But I think about when we're adding people to our team, it's okay to mess around and to experiment and to have a trial with different people. We can add in a bunch of people, but that does not mean I have to keep using them. You look at the list, like you said, with Don Parsons, Preston. We used them for a little bit. We tried it. We saw what worked, what didn't work. And then, even though we're not continuing with them, it was something for me to, try it. If it didn't work, it didn't work. We'll push it aside, on to the next. And I think that's what we've been doing really good. Is my team is very small, but we've tried a lot of different options. And we've tried to see what works best. And sometimes you're going to hit it spot on with the first one we try. Sometimes we're not. But I look at JJ for an example. I hit it. I think I hit it out of the ballpark on that one. I'm really lucky to have him. I know he communicates well with you, and that goes the same with as a caddy. I think that same relationship in college is your college coach. Do they understand who you are? I've been pretty fortunate to have you get to know Walter when I was in college, get to know him a little bit, who he is. We've talked about him, he's talked to you, and that helped, the transition from junior to college golf, because, it was an extra factor of, okay, I've got another coach. How is he going to coach me? How is he going to respect what you're doing with me, what we're learning, what we're working for? And, he was really open to, what you had to say, and realize, both of you guys wanted me to become the best player in the country, but who was going to put their input in what areas, and how were you guys going to work together? And that's what JJ has done really well now to take over that spot.
Great. And that's, again, part back to development, right? There's these different stages which are going to require different input from outside sources. Now, I do want to respect everybody's time. We're going to go over the hour allotment. There's a link if you need to leave. I understand that. We have a few more things that we want to talk about. And I know we have some questions at the end. So as I now looking at the other side of the coin, which is what I think is detrimental, and I'll go through some of these somewhat quickly, but I mentioned this before, is that as coaches, we have to be careful of how much we're praising these youth golfers only when they medal in a tournament via an Instagram post or a Facebook post. I know as a coach, I'm very proud of when my students do well. I totally get it. I'm just telling you from a junior's perspective, I've had, this was a fairly recent one, a parent come to me and said, hey, little Johnny used to win all the US Kids Tour events when he was 11. He's now 17 and he doesn't win it anymore. And I go, okay, but has little Johnny gotten better? Is his scores gotten better? Oh yeah, he's gotten better. I go, okay, well, competition changes, okay? But this player, when I had a mental game session, unfortunately had no confidence, because it was all about the past, is that I used to win all the time. Now I'm not winning, thus I am a failure. And so we have to be careful with the fine line of celebrating. I think, again, proud of your students, that's great. I know some other coaches like Dan Martin, who I respect a lot. He's going to post a lot about the process that is going on well. Hey, I've worked with this player and they're really doing a great job of going through a pre-shot routine, and I saw them playing in this tournament and did this. I love those type of things, obviously, because now that's more growth mindset of this is something I can do over and over again. The other thing is I'm seeing a lot of juniors jumping coaches a ton, and I've been people jumping to me and people jumping away from me, so it happens all over the place. We got to be careful with that, and I think as coaches we want to certainly up level our skill set, so we're prepared for the level of player that is coming to you. We've already talked about parents with their unreasonable expectations. We're helping them understand the challenges that junior golf provides and giving them a path and educating them also. The other thing that has come up a little bit more recently is I've actually seen juniors who are not open to competition. They're not embracing competition. They say, no, I'm not ready for tournaments yet. I go, okay, that's fine. But then if I want to compete with them in a lesson, oh, no, I'm not good enough. It's like, No, let's learn how to compete. Let's learn how to push ourselves. You got to take tests in English class, right? You're going to get tested. So we need to do that on the golf course too. And the ones that I've seen succeed the most at the highest level tended to have a very highly competitive chip in them as they go. So I'm seeing that is changing a little bit. The last one is, and I fell into this early on as a coach, was perfect golf swing. I think now that we have the technology of TrackMan and force plates and 3D vests and all this stuff, I don't know if that always equates into a better player and actually playing the game. And that's the same thing with Instagram. Oh, here's a picture of the student. And yeah, the positions look great. And then you look them up on, and I go, oh, that person can't even break 80 yet, you know? So I think we have to do a better job of developing the entire player. A golf swing is, of course, a key component of that, but does it translate to the course? And they have to learn how to play more. So that's me on my little high podium there, but I think some of those things need to be addressed as coaching, and also from the player's perspective, understanding that some of these challenges get in the way of development.
Rick, from the coaching standpoint side, if we're going to be critical of ourselves as a profession, as instructors, you know, we're not, obviously a lot of us work hard to, you know, help our players get better. If there was 2 or 3 things that maybe our industry should be doing less of, because I think we do way too much as an industry, what might be some things that us as coaches, working players, could just do a little bit less of?
I mean, I'll go back to some of this list. I think we need to do less technology at early ages. I know Collin and I have joked about TrackMan. I don't even know if we used TrackMan before he went to college, or any kind of radar system. But I think as coaches, and those that have used TrackMan are very good at just giving the amount of information they need to. Some young coaches that rely on TrackMan, I think, give too much information. And what are we trying to accomplish? So I think understanding cause and effect using technology, okay, that's fine. But now I have a ball below my feet and in a thin lie to a back right hole location with the wind crossing. I'm not sure what the TrackMan is going to help me with in that particular case. So I would say less technology early. As they get older and they can take information in and they need to understand more cause and effect, I'm fine with that. And I really have to be careful with the social media stuff. I don't do a lot of social media, but you have to understand the player's perspective too, is if they're only getting praised for when they win, it sets them up for some issues down the road. So those are I come back to those 2 things, because I think that does take away from the playing of the game.
Yeah, I think you know, maybe bringing the conversation back to us as professionals working with youth, you know, on the practice range or in lessons in those areas. And it's kind of funny, when I first started teaching once upon a time ago, I would almost be scared starting a golf lesson, because I was like, what if I see something and I have no idea what to do? I was almost felt like the student when I first started teaching, because I didn't know what I was going to encounter, and it was exciting because you know, what's going to happen? What if I can't help this person? Given tens of thousands of golf lessons now, that's not the case necessarily anymore. But it's kind of ironic that the more I feel like I could say 5 or 10 things to a student on anything that I see, the more I'm starting to realize, and it's something I'm working on as a professional, that learning actually happens much better for the player when they're allowed to experience things and try things on their own. I just think as an industry, and I'd be curious your opinion on this, you know, letting players come up with the solution. You know, what's going on there? What did you just do on that shot? Okay, so if you were to make a change that you think would help that shot get better, what do you think that it would be? And try to involve the student in coming up with the answer. If I could go through a lesson and ask questions that allowed the player to come up with the solution themselves, versus me telling them what the answer is and then them doing what I tell them, I think that it's a deeper level of learning. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I totally agree. I mean, I've been teaching for a long time now, over 26 years, and I would say the first 5 years, it was me telling people what to do. That's not a very good feedback loop, as I call it. So I want to create feedback immediately. Collin hits a great shot. I want to know more about what he experienced on that shot. What was he feeling? What was he thinking? What was he doing? Because I can see something and go, oh, wow, great. It looked like a great release position. So I don't know what he was experiencing. So I ask a ton of questions, and that's how I learn what's best for the player. But I also agree that the student needs to be allowed to experiment. As a junior, yes, I had lessons every now and then, but I had some more fun learning how to hit a flop shot and sculling some into people's backyards and all that. And you figure out a way, I think, is extremely beneficial down the road.
We have about maybe 10 to 15 minutes left. I don't know. I will give you guys an opportunity to wrap up if you have thoughts, and then I wanted to try to get to some of the questions that have been asked of you guys. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So let me just share one more slide here. Is talking about what are some of the things that we do have these challenges, right? And I mentioned that I get to do a lot of playing lessons. I know not all facilities allow you to do that, but maybe you can have 3 of your juniors that are similar skilled and do a playing lesson together, and they pay for a 9-hole green fee or something like that, and go out there with them, have them play a scramble and have you talk about each shot as you go along. We've talked already about we need to educate parents better on the development of this journey over just short-term results. And again, going against kind of this perfect golf swing trend, it's interesting in this day and age. Obviously, with Collin and Matthew Wolf, getting to play a lot together, seeing him in practice rounds, you have different swings that produce great results. So we got to get away from the perfect swing idea. We have to also understand that these juniors are feeling more pressure earlier and earlier. These 12-year-olds, which used to be, oh, I'm going to go have some fun, now are feeling pressured if they don't win this U.S. Kids tournament and get enough points to get the regional championship, they can't go to blah, blah. And so we have to understand that as coaches. And yes, they want to win, but we have to be aware that they may not be emotionally ready. We alluded to this earlier. If the motivation is just extrinsic reasons for, hey, I need to play golf because of a college scholarship. I've seen too many people, they get the college scholarship, and then the first year they stop playing golf. So we need to understand that we want to have the internal love of the game and the challenge and the intrinsic reasons to play some more. So now, Josh, we can get into some questions.
Yeah, Collin, actually, this one just came through kind of related. It's Collin, can you give some of your goals as a junior golfer when you were 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old?
Yeah, wow, that's hard to think back. It's what I was doing 10 years ago. I think some of my goals were set. I was playing SCPGA, and the next goal was, can I make it to Toyota Tour Cup? It was the best, local area tournaments to play. I mean, I remember looking at Bo Hosler and trying just to even get an event with him. And now I'm playing with him on the PGA Tour, and I know him pretty well. But it's like, you see a bunch of these guys in this tour. How was I going to get to the Toyota Tour Cup? I had to earn enough points in whatever the fall, spring, summer, whatever season it was to get there. So I was so focused on trying to earn as many points as I could to get to Toyota Tour Cup. So like that was one of my goals back then was, can I go and play in the Toyota Tour Cup? But also, how were we going to do that? How was I going to get ready to play in AJGAs? Was I going to be ready to play them? I felt like by the time, because there's that age, I think it's like 13 or whatever for AJGAs. How was I going to be ready when I was 13 to go and compete with those guys? I started off playing junior all-stars where it was like the 13 to 15 age group. But, I wanted to feel as prepared as I could when I got to that level. So when I was that young, when I was 10, when I realized what AJGAs were, what Toyota Tour Cups were, how was I going to get there and how was I going to be ready? Not just show up and just hit me like a freaking train hit me, like, wow, what just happened? This is a whole different tournament. No, I didn't play great in every event, but it was, was I going to be ready to get out there?
Collin, this question just came through, obviously in the tough times that we're facing right now with stay-at-home orders. Actually, a couple the same question came through from a number of people here. For the coaches that are on this call, parents and or players, what are some suggestions that folks could do at home that would help to keep them sharp in their golf games?
I mean, it's tough. I mean, we talked about a lot of motivation stuff and how do we stay motivated. And for me, I'll be honest, it is tough right now because we don't know when we're going to get back out there. We don't know when the next tournament will be, when we'll be playing again, especially, for you guys in California. I think everything's closed. So I think this is the time to really, get your basics set up. So if you could just even stand in a room and look how your setup is. Are you aiming straight? That's the best, because, a lot of the times when Rick and I talk about what's going wrong with a certain tournament or a certain week, it goes back to certain basics, where my shoulders are aligned, where my feet are aligned, how my posture is. It's always going back to the basics. So yeah, we can't see a ball flight. We can't see what the ball's going to do, what the feel of a shot is going to be like, but how do we get our basics to where, I can step out in 2 weeks. I know when I set a club down, this is where I'm going to be standing. And from there, you're going to have to swing it. Who knows what the ball is going to do, but from there, at least your basics are aware, where you want them to be. But I'm using this time to really work out as much as I can, work out at home, do something, strengthen certain body parts. If you're a junior, do something fun, have fun at home, make it creative, and just keep going like that.
Not that you hit very many of them, but what steps do you take moving on from a bad shot when you're in competition?
I mean, I have to realize I hit a bad shot. Sometimes you're going to laugh it off. Sometimes you're in a position to laugh it off, and you have to brush it off like that lightly, and that's going to be okay. Other times when, just say we're around the cut line and, you hit a bad shot when you need to hit a good shot. You have to take in and realize what you're doing in that moment and then move on to the next shot. If like I said earlier, you can't dwell on the previous shot. I'm okay. And I think, Rick can touch up on this. I'm okay, walking after that next shot and thinking just say I hit the bad shot and I've got all that time to walk to my next shot. If I dwell on that shot, that's okay. I'm going to think about what I did wrong. What was it, a mental error, physical error? Try and figure out that really quick process since, we've practiced and we've learned what cause and effects are. Try and figure that out. If I'm still mad, okay. But when I get to my next shot, that pre-shot routine, when I step into that shot, everything else is gone. I have to focus on that next shot. I have to focus on what I'm trying to do here, because at that point, I'm already in that situation. And I have to realize, okay, I can't do anything. It's out of my hands. Let's go try and hit a great shot, the next one.
I have dogs I could bring up too, Rick. It's a competition.
I had a special guest here. Is a post-shot routine, again, is about understanding what we learned from the shot. Again, it could be a mechanical thing, could be a mental thing. And again, it's okay to keep learning, but not have the self-critical of, oh, I'm horrible on this. It's like, oh, that shot went left. I wonder why it went left. Let's learn. So again, Collin's always done a great job with it. It doesn't mean you have to be happy, okay? But it does mean we can move on and learn from that.
This question could go to either one of you or both of you. With respect to scholarships, and we have players, let's even maybe say especially that socioeconomic factors wouldn't allow someone to just pay for getting into a school. What are some things that coaches look for in players, maybe even beyond some of the physical things? And what are some things that players should be aware of about how they handle themselves that are make or break with respect to being candidates for playing on college teams?
You want to start off, Rick, or you want to go? You want me to go?
I had a hard time hearing the whole question, to be honest with you. I had a little breakup on that.
Just with respect to scholarships, and let's just assume that the player doesn't have the money to go. What is it that coaches are looking for in players, maybe even beyond some of the physical things, or what are some things that young players should be aware of, and what are some things that we as coaches should be aware of to instill in our players that are make or break for a player being a candidate for a 2 earned scholarship in college?
I can just say from a coach's perspective, because I got to work with some Division I, Division II coaches who say they're looking for character. They're looking for how does somebody bounce back after a poor shot. They're looking like how do they react to their parents coming off the 18th hole? How do they interact with the volunteers? That has nothing to do with, oh, does their golf swing look great? They'll obviously see your scores. They'll know if you're a player or not. But I would say what I've heard when you're in that 16, 17 age group is it's a lot more about character issue is, are you going to be a good teammate? Are you going to be somebody who's coachable? So that's what the coaches have told me. Collin, I don't know, you've been on a team where you guys have had big goals. What do you think? What do you think the coaches are looking for?
I mean, everyone's different. And I think that's what you have to embrace is that when you show up to these meetings and when you're having, official visits and whatever, you're eating lunch with the guys, you do not have to be this perfect, spotless person, because then they're going to look at you and feel like something's off. You've got to be you. And I know it's really tough. I was very nervous when I was eating lunch with a bunch of these visits, when I would go on these, these tours and see these guys that I'm like, oh, wow, these guys are going to be the next guys on the PGA Tour. Yeah, I'm going to be nervous, but you got to be you. I mean, the coaches, they're going to be looking for, obviously good people. Like Rick said, they're going to be looking for who's going to benefit our team, not, create chaos and be the one person that's going to stick out like a sore thumb and, just make it harder on everyone else in that team. The golf teams ranged from 7, 8 guys to, I had 15, 16 guys at some point. So, if you compare that to other teams, we're pretty small. And the amount of time you spent with the guys is enormous. And you spend so much time with them, you want to be able to mesh well together. And that's what they're looking for. I think one thing, people might, and scholarships are important, hands down, and I think NCAA is offering all this stuff, but, I wasn't one of those players where I was pushing myself when I was 14 to have to get a scholarship by 16. I didn't set a deadline of, man, if I don't get to this school, or if I don't have a scholarship, if I don't commit to this school so early, I'm going to feel like I'm out of place. I still, felt like I was one of the better players during that junior time, but there was no rush to get that done because I knew if I was good enough, I was going to find a spot. And I know recruiting has changed a little bit with, timing, and everything's a little later now. But, there you see so many people, and you see it on Instagram, whatever it is, you see someone commit and you're like, oh, there goes a spot. What am I going to do with this? What am I going to do with that? And yeah, it's going to create some worry. It has to, because, yeah, there's a spot taken away from you, but you have to realize there are so many schools out there that you can still be the best player. You don't have to go to the biggest school. You don't have to go to a school that everyone has heard of and become the best player you can be and become, whatever goals you set. You can still go to any school and get a scholarship and go make something out of it and become a better player from that.
Collin,
chime in real quick.
Oh, sorry. Go.
Josh, I'm sorry. Kind of a follow-up on that in a way. I got a question that came through about how do you balance golf and social life? And that would be both for a teenager, but then also with college, is that we know time management, energy management is very important. Any ideas of what you feel is the best way to, balance golf and school and social life?
Yeah, I mean, time management is very important. And I think it's all about being really efficient. Like I said, I've never been a person to spend a lot of time on the range. I probably should have spent more time on the putting green, and I'm doing that now. But, it's how efficient can you be with your time? In high school, your times are set. You go to school at 8, 8:30, get out at 3, and then you have that afternoon to practice. And sometimes there's not a lot of daylight, so you are out there. You're playing, you're practicing, whatever. When you have a lot of time on your hands, like when you go to college and you have, just say, 1 class a day or 2 classes in the morning, and then you have a full afternoon, you have lunch, or just say you have from 10 to 6 p.m. What do? Does that mean you have to be out there at all times? No, I don't believe that. I mean, you can, there's going to be some days where you want to be out there. But if you don't really want to be out there, you're not going to be practicing smart. You're not going to be doing things. You're going to be almost, hurting your game in a sense of just being out there instead of learning something. So, I think you're better off going out there for an hour, hour and a half, and trying to figure something out as quickly as you can. And that hour and a half is going to go by so quickly. And then you can go spend, your social life, go hang out with friends, go do other things. And you're going to feel like you accomplished a lot more than just saying, yeah, I was out there for 6 hours today. That was always a tough question when people asked me as a junior, or, when I was in college, oh, you must practice, how many hours do you practice a day? I don't know. I'm not going to say I practice 8 hours a day. Like, I'm not going to lie to them because I don't. And, even as a pro now, I have to be really efficient with my time. I have to know what I'm doing, because on these off weeks, if I just grind, yes, there are going to be certain weeks where I need to do that. Certain tournaments I need to prep for. But if I do these on these off weeks, and you're going to go out and try and have fun and try and play and compete, you're going to be mentally burnt out by the time you get there. And I think you have to be ready that first day of the tournament to the last. So do all your prep you need to. But if you're going to balance your golf life, your social life, your school, you just have to be efficient with what you do.
You guys, I know you guys mentioned that you did weekly lessons when you were even 8, 9, 10. I asked, how long were the golf lessons that you guys did on a weekly basis when you were younger? And Rick, do you have how long do you think lessons should be with pros teaching kids when they're at younger ages?
You broke up a little bit. Was it how much time was each lesson?
Yeah, how long was each golf lesson that you guys did when you met weekly when he was a junior golfer? And do you think that should be how long golf lessons are for other pros that are teaching kids?
Well, I mean, if these 8, 9, and 10, I'm not going to spend 1 hour on the range working on a golf swing. So maybe some of the early lessons were 30 minutes long, but as it went along and more of the lessons were done on the golf course anyways, the hour was a good chunk of time. Now, again, everybody has different attention spans. Collins was very good, okay? So he wasn't going to start goofing around and stuff like that. So, of course, the juniors' maturity level, their attention span is going to have a big part of this, but me personally don't want to hit golf balls for an hour straight on a range. So why would I want to make my student do that? So I would change things up. If it was going to be a 1 hour session, it wouldn't be always a swing type of lesson. So I think that has a lot to do with the maturity and the attention span. Again, I was fortunate to go on the golf course, which, half hour goes by way too quick. So an hour was a good chunk of time.
Collin, a couple questions related. I'm going to lump them together so we can get more of these voices in here. Non-golf related activities that you engage in outside of golf that you think help you with golf, and on that point, how do you keep calm? Do you do work with Zen and yoga, or the role of music, either when you're practicing or not practicing?
I think anything other than golf is going to help you with golf. I think so many people, live, breathe it, and I love it. And I do live and breathe golf, but anything you do outside of golf is going to help. I mean, I love playing basketball with a bunch of friends. We love going on hikes, love spending time in the ocean, whatever it is. Everyone has their own hobbies, but, for me, I love staying active, but get myself away from the golf. I think that's the best thing I did for myself in college was I took a week off, actually, during that winter time, didn't touch my clubs at all. And it was the best thing, because when I did come back, I loved it even more. I wanted to get out there. I wanted to go sharpen my game. I wanted to get better. And I wish I did that when I was a junior. And I probably did, just not knowing. But, I wish I did that a little more often. Not more often, but I wish I did that, at least once or twice a year as a junior. And then I think, I don't do yoga. We did a little yoga in college. I think what helps me is just, a lot we've done. Rick has helped me with a lot of breathing exercises. I do a lot of breathing. If you watch me during my pre-shot routines, during tournaments, I try and stay as calm as I can. I actually used to listen to music. I used to listen to the same song for an hour on repeat during my warm-up. Throughout high school, and even probably like the first couple of years of college, which sounds crazy. And it would just go on repeat, but it's not like I'm listening to anything. It would just, keep me relaxed, and you got to find what keeps you relaxed. And, you know, for me, it was just having some music. I love practicing with music on. I love listening to it while I practice, because it keeps you at ease. You know, we do so much of grinding and trying to figure what's right, is that you need something to kind of balance that. And I don't think it's not necessarily wrong to grind. You still need to do that. But for me, you know, having some music on while you practice, nothing wrong with that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Really appreciate that. On behalf of the SCPGA Teaching Committee, the SCPGA Youth Summit that we do every year, can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys taking time to help us become better professionals, and those who are players and parents alike listening into today's podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation with Rick and Collin. And again, this will be filmed, so you will have an opportunity to see this at a later date. It was all recorded, and I think we're pretty much out of time. Rick, if you wanted to close with anything, feel free. Otherwise, again, thank you guys so much, and looking forward to the next opportunity to connect with you.
Right. Again, thank you so much. Thank you, Josh. I love your passion for the game and for youth development. I think we're very fortunate, like I said before, being in Southern California section, we've got so many talented coaches and professionals that are growing the game. I do have my contact information here if somebody wants to ask me questions, and I'm always here for that. But and I want to thank all those parents and those students across the years who have trusted me in that. So thank you, Collin, for all these years. It's been fun.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Go Bears.
Go Bears. Yeah.